consequence to me.
Hi everyone, I hope you're doing very well. Last October in 2020, I released my debut single No Consequence, which features, among other things, a guitar solo of my own that I would say is actually one of my favourites. This is for a number of reasons, but not really because of how flashy it may or may not be. I suppose that's in the ear of the beholder. For me, it's more to do with the intriguing simplicity of the gear I used to record it, and how it added to the emotion of the song. As you might have guessed from the title of the video, what I'm mainly going to be discussing is the amp that many might dismiss on paper as a usable recording amp. But the proof to the contrary is in the pudding, or the audio. So, let's get to it, shall we? To kick things off, let's take a listen to the first few seconds of the solo isolated so you can all get a sense of the sound we've got.
Okay, here we are. I've got this alternatively named project file open in Logic for my song No Consequence. I've named this particular one Solo Breakdown because I thought we'd be potentially changing around a few things. I didn't want to mess anything up in the original project file basically, so I'm just playing it safe. So here is the solo, obviously. I'm going to solo it now, no pun intended, and take off all the post effects here so you can hear the original raw audio from the SM57 mic as it was recorded in the room. So let's take a listen. Okay, that's the first few seconds there, and there are a couple of things I just want to point out before we move on. So these fades here at either end, mostly this one I'm going to be talking about, I put those in post because I felt it was a more desirable musical effect to have this first harmonic sort of feedback note fade in, instead of it starting from a plucked note, which I had to pick from sort of about the previous bar back here. I discovered that it was feeding back in that particular way while I was recording it, but I thought, well, hang on, I'll just do a take where I let that ring out for a bit before the solo actually begins. So I plucked the note back here before, you know, a bar or so before the solo actually starts in the song, and by that point where it does begin, it's sort of got this lovely upper octave harmonic that rings out really nicely, so you get this sort of effect of it starting very much as a swell. And that just felt quite musical to me, so I kept that in there and just dragged the audio waveform this way a bit and then put the fade in. So yeah, it just has this lovely sort of swell to it.
Now, I think most of us can agree that that is at least a cool enough guitar tone, right? Obviously, I'll get into why I used the Blues Cube in a bit, but right now, let's talk about the axe I wielded for this recording. This solo features my 1993 Special Edition Fender Stratocaster, which, if you're familiar to the channel, you may have seen before. In fact, not only the solo, but all the guitar parts on this song were recorded using this instrument. It just seemed to do everything I wanted it to do perfectly well, so I never swapped it out. I only changed pickup selection for different parts in the song to make them more discernible, which is a production trick I often use when I'm layering multiple guitar parts, whether they are different or I'm duplicating them for double tracking, for instance. And I think this tone pot was wired to affect the bridge and middle pickups, which, compared to other triple single coil Strats I've played, the tone seems a little bit darker, which I quite like in a way because often you can find that these sound a little bit too bright with most Strats, so having that darker tone helped me a bit. Little side note, When it comes to replicating a guitar tone you like, or even making your own go-to sound, don't forget how important pickup selection can be. I've seen so many guitarists, admittedly usually beginners or sometimes even intermediate players, making the mistake of neglecting pickup choice when they're chasing a tone. But if you think about it more in terms of the pickup selection being where you can begin to change the sound or voice of the guitar electronically, then it can change your thinking drastically. Just look at how many times someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan will change their pickup selection in the middle of a single solo sometimes. From the guitar, we head to the real core of this video, the amp. I truly believe that this is probably the most important part of this tone, at least with regards to this particular guitar and amp combination. If it was a blindfold test, I reckon it would shock some of you to know that this came from a solid state amp. And it's an amp I've obviously covered on my YouTube channel before quite early on, and I'm of course referring to the Roland Blues Cube Artist. I really hope I'm not losing too many die-hard valve or tube enthusiasts out there, but I think it is important to point out that it is very possible to get an incredibly satisfying and usable tone from this piece of modern solid-state technology. As far as recording it goes, I just whacked an SM57 an inch in front of it, just off centre from the speaker cone. About as simple as you can record an amp, really. To be blunt, if I didn't think it sounded good, I wouldn't have used it to record anything, let alone my debut single. Of course, a certain amount of this is subjective, but let me talk you through why I personally adore this tone. First off, the dynamics. I went straight into the amp's crunch channel for this recording with the approximate settings you should be able to see on screen now. So you can see how I was running it. It was fairly well dimed as far as the preamp gain and volume go for the crunch channel at least. The sheer difference in grit just from how hard I would pick a note was so musically expressive to me, and something I felt worked really well for the different dynamic swells of the song it was being used for. Second, the honky mid-focus tone, which made it cut through beautifully in the mix, as well as providing some wonderful harmonics that let the first note of the solo ring out in a really satisfying way. Finally, the articulation. I think this does partly come from the Strat in all fairness, but the attack of every picked note sounds clearly defined and punchy, yet the legato lines I play are fluid and almost violin-like in their sound, while the sustain gives it a smooth and buttery quality which, in this context, was very attractive to me. So with all of this in mind, it made perfect sense to me to use this simple combo of gear for the core sound of this solo. Sometimes all you really do need is a guitar and an amp. The only other parts of this tone were added in post during the mixing process, as is the case for almost any record. In this case, a touch of EQ, compression, and a bit of stereo delay for some ambience. Let's hear the difference between these being off and on.
Right, here we are again in the project file. I've just set up this little bit of a loop here for this phrase of the solo, so you can hear it over and over again for reference while I'm adding in or taking out any of these effects I've put in post, so you can hear the difference. So we're going to start by playing without, and then I'll add it in. So the EQ first. Let's take a listen. So let's take a look at what I've done here. The thing I was going for was just sort of clearing it up and adding some clarity. So what I've done to achieve that is taking out quite a bit of the flub and low end with this low cut here, up to 166 hertz. That seemed to do the trick. And, you know, taking out what I thought was the unnecessary sort of airy, hairy part of the sound way above 10k. So yeah, I've just sort of rolled that off completely. I didn't need that for this tone. And to add some bite and definition, as I was saying, a bit of a hump at 2.7k, and again a little bit more around 4.6, just to give it this nice lump here, because that's really where a lot of definition and bite for guitar tones comes from, in my experience at least. So yes, overall it's kind of made a nice difference to the raw audio's definition. Let's hear it again without. And then with. And there's something about that sounds kind of accidentally, and it's not what I was aiming for at all, but kind of accidentally a bit Brian May-esque. Partly because of the pickup selection I've got, because he did also quite commonly use a bridge and middle pickup combo, but of course his guitar was wired in series as opposed to the Strat's usual parallel. So a little bit of a difference in thickness, I guess, but not a million miles away in terms of the tone. Right, I'm going to leave the EQ on from now on, and we're going to test the difference between the compressor being off and on. So let's take a listen again. Right, a pretty obvious lift in volume for starters, of course. That wasn't really the main thing I was going for here. Again, it was just about adding punch and definition. It was all about really making sure this solo could cut through in all of its little intricacies. And what I was relying on the compressor to do for that purpose was to lift all the quiet parts of the signal, the bits that may not have been heard or lost in the mix a little bit, because it was supposed to be quite a sort of expressive, intricate kind of solo. It's that kind of song. It needed that kind of playing for me anyway. So yeah, I've set it fairly moderately, not too outrageous, but yeah, it was really just about kind of making it sound kind of fat and punchy. So let's just hear it again without and then with. So it's really not being left behind at all there. When you hear it in the full mix, it's really punching and cutting through. So finally, the ambient part of this sound that I wanted to have in, because obviously right now it's still dry as a bone in terms of kind of the wetness of the sound. So I added in this stereo delay, and I often use stereo delay. Try to do it more tastefully, I suppose, because if you have too much too often, it can be a little overbearing. It's like, you know, chocolate cake with every meal. You know, it's great, but you don't want it all the time. So in this case, fairly low mix, rolled back to about 20%, and of course I've made use of the tempo sync to set the times for each delay. I've just made sure that the sort of note division that it follows fits with the 6/8 time signature. That can be quite important if you're fussy about that sort of thing. But yes, feedback at 35 for each, and the EQ cutoff for both of these set the same, because the way I wanted it set was to kind of be halfway between a very detailed digital delay, which this really is, but also on its way to being kind of analog tape delay-ish, because they were known for rolling off a bit of high end, which can be helpful in terms of giving your original source audio a bit more space. It wouldn't be too clouded up by the repeats that you're getting from the delay signal. So yeah, it was sort of halfway between that. So let's take a listen to without and then with again. So it's at this point I need to apologise, of course, because I almost forgot to mention that the stereo effect, I think, through this screen recording app I'm using, doesn't seem to come through. Unfortunately, it does sum everything to mono, I think, through the little test I did before I did this recording. So if you do want to hear the full stereo effect, in case this isn't working as it should be right now, then go to the start of this video, or indeed listen to the original track, because you will hear it in all of its glory and working as it should in those contexts.
Right guys, I do hope you got something out of that, because I actually quite enjoyed picking apart my own recordings and talking about the gear I used to get them. You do obviously see a lot of videos discussing well-known artists and their recording gear, speculatively or otherwise, but it's cool to be able to share and talk about some of the tones that I know exactly how I got. It would be wonderful to know that someone out there is learning something from this on some level, be it about guitar tone or tech, or discovering a new piece of amazing sounding gear, perhaps even changing an opinion or two. Anyway, there are potentially many things to discuss and ponder over. If this kind of thing interests you, of course, please do drop a comment below, because I could gab about it for hours. Alternatively, if there is another hot musical topic that you would like me to share my thoughts on, then just let me know. If you haven't already, please do check out my debut single. It's available anywhere you can stream it, as well as my channel. And it would mean the world to me to get some of the monumental support I've had for the channel so far to pump up those streaming numbers for the song. Thank you to those who have supported me so far, and thank you to those who may do so in the future. And now, as usual, for the housekeeping, as I sorely need subscribers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you can catch any content like this, plus anything else that you will no doubt enjoy. I'm still offering one-on-one guitar tuition online, so you can get in touch with me on my socials, which are linked below in the description. But until next time, folks, stay safe out there, stay positive, and stay musical.